I am thrilled that Lynn and Susan are here today to talk about mediating with the homeless. Lynn and I met, I don't know, a year or so or more ago for a while, and I said to her, I would like someday for you to come and talk to a group of our mediators. And we never thought this day would come, but it has. And I'm also delighted that Susan, who's the publisher of the Groundcover magazine, is here today to talk with us. And Susan's going to start, and then let them talk. And then we'll hold questions till after they finish talking. I told them if we start getting questions in the beginning, then we never get to what they want to say, finish up what they want to say, because this is a very talkative group. Okay.
Okay. So my understanding is that the purpose of this is to help you with the kind of the backstory and mindset of people you might be conducting a mediation with. So that's where I'm going to start. And you know, I have to start by saying I'm not really an expert. I have now 5 or 6 years of experience, you know, personal experience, but I don't have training in this. But you know, I've lived through some trauma with some people, and so I'm going to share from what I've learned from that, and also I've now done a fair amount of research, particularly as related to the criminal justice system and homelessness, so I'll draw somewhat on that as well. So by the time you encounter somebody, chances are that they're going to be very, very distrustful. They've already been humiliated by the police, chances are by DHS, the Department of Human Services, by the Department of Child and Family Services. They've been deceived by district attorneys. They've been disregarded by public defenders. So there's a huge amount of suspicion and distrust. And you know, this is for many people who have become homeless. They already have a long history with the legal system. They've been encumbered by the courts, assessed fees they have no hope of paying, told they have to jump through hoops. Often they, you know, for people who have children, that's one of the first points of leverage. Children can be taken away for no other reason than because you're unable to provide what the courts, what they consider to be stable housing. So if you don't have an apartment or a house in your name, your children can be taken away from you. And then to get them back, courts will often require parenting classes and drug tests and supervised visits. And so it's and many of those things you're required to pay for on top of all that. So while you're struggling to get the kind of housing that will allow you to have your children back, get your children back, be further encumbered, and random drug testing is very hard to hold a job, and so you know people's experiences with courts are that they are just out to get them. In addition to that, many people are struggling with various kinds of mental illness, especially depression. And you know, sometimes poverty and homelessness are a result of a pre-existing condition like that, but often it's actually triggered by poverty and homelessness. But however you get there, it's really hard to do anything when you're depressed. And then there's just the grind of living in poverty. You know, even if you're lucky enough to get food stamps and some kinds of assistance, it's rare that there's cash available for personal hygiene items and for storage lockers. That's, you know, I just realized I did not turn off my phone, so if anybody else is in that situation, maybe we should do that. Yeah. So, you know, when you lose your place, you lose your ability to keep track of your things, and so, and you've lost. Well, so you get evicted, you end up with a couple of bags of of personal mementos and some furniture. And a lot of times people will get these large storage lockers to hold on to as much as they can. It's like, you know, they're trying to hold on to their lives. But meantime, that's money that can't then go towards rent at a place to stay. And it's kind of it's a vicious circle. So people, you know, so there's this sense of being trapped. They can't hold on to their past. They can't move forward, and where they are is untenable. And most of the, I mean, one of the things that Groundcover has really helped with, but is still pretty pervasive, is isolation. So, you know, that the instinct is when you see somebody who's down and out is to avoid them. And then, you know, so if everyone in mainstream society is avoiding you, who's left is people in the same condition as you are, and they're also needy, and you don't have the resources to necessarily share. And some people are you know, will prey on others. So, you know, what I found is that people who've been living on the streets for a while, they don't even know the names of people, you know. They probably couldn't name 20 other people in the community. They're just totally isolated. And with that isolation comes a really thick layer of defenses. And some of that show, you know, in some people that shows up as tremendous hostility. They're just a fight waiting, and you know, an insult waiting to be delivered, and it takes a lot of time to get past that. A fair amount of reacclimation. And then there's the decision making. You know, the reality of the situations that they're living in are different than the realities that we're aware of. And that the norms are just so totally different. You know, everything is short term. You know, what is the best thing I can do, you know, for the right result right now, or maybe tonight. A lot of it's about tonight. How can I resolve my situation for tonight? And so you see people making decisions and say, oh my God, that's just going to get you trapped for so much longer. But that's not part, you know, for them it's tonight. It's all right, because tonight I'll have a place to stay. So, you know, it's, what I find is I have to often ask a number of questions about, well, what is it that's leading you to that decision? What can you lead me through the thinking? Because I just have no frame of reference for most of it. So that's, you know, I'm going to stop at that, you know, I'm going to stop with that. And then I'm going to address the agencies and the helpers, because one of the things, Lit has you know, you'll get a much more first-hand experience from her. And one of the things that happens often is people are turned away again and again and again from the agencies that they expect to help them. And so that, again, there's more distrust and disbelief and lack of trust. And so from the agency's point of view, I just want to let you know, to remind you that they're responding often to the incentives and requirements attached to their funding, and they're trying to bring in as many resources as they can so they can help the maximum number of people. And sometimes that leads to cherry picking, you know, where they'll pick the people who are easiest to get housed, because then it shows that they're doing a good job, and then they'll get more funding and they'll be able to help more people. On the other hand, that also means that some of the most vulnerable people are left on their own. know, the agencies around, you know, the Washington Housing Alliance agencies have been, there are model agencies as far as, you know, the national authorities are concerned. They've got all kinds of bonus vouchers because of the way they work together and the high standards and the recent emphasis on ending chronic homelessness and veteran homelessness, which has actually been very, it's been very successful. So they've gotten a lot more vouchers. A lot of people have gotten housed as a result of it, including many people who sell Groundcover. So despite all the bad things you're going to hear about them, keep it in mind that they've done some good things, and when they were incentivized to house the chronically homeless, they did that. So a lot of it has to do with how the various, you know, governmental agencies put out their what requirements and incentives they provide. And then the other thing is that some of them, like the Delana Center, deal with very difficult populations. When people get released from prison, the Delana Center is where they often go for meals, if not to live. And again, that, you know, there's a word for that. The survival mechanisms that people develop in prison, similar to the ones that they develop on the street, they're appropriate in prison. They keep them alive and safe, but they're really, I forgot the word, but they're negative behaviors in general society. So places like the Delana Center feel that they have to have very strict rules that are universally enforced just to keep everybody safe. But again, there's the side effect that it is a problem, particularly for people with any kind of mental illness who have problems following rules. And the other thing is that most of these agencies, although they have some senior staff, they're mostly run by brand new grads, maybe from the School of Social Work, but they're brand new grads and interns. So they don't have much life experience to draw. And they're always under pressure to do more with less. So that's my background, and I'm going to turn you over to the real expert. Take it away, Liz.
Thank you. I don't feel like an expert, but I can speak from my experience. First of all, I go by Lit. My name is Elizabeth Kurtz. I sort of shortened my name after I got out here because you can't carry a lot on the street, and just about everybody on the street has a name different from their own name. There's 240 Shorty, for example, Rhino, you know, the list goes on, you know, and I thought I would shorten my name to Lit. I was a teacher in Detroit before this happened to me, and there was another woman who, along with myself, was sort of concerned about the kids out on the street who weren't getting an adequate education or missing, you know, missing the educational standpoint on the street. So she said, well, I'm Miss Honey. And I said, I am, and I didn't want to say Elizabeth, and I kept going through sort of a Rolodex of names, Beth, Lizzie, da-da-da-da-da. And I said, okay, Lit. And that stuck. And I went around and told everybody, I'm Lit. So that's who I've been for about 3 years. And I don't answer anything else. That's what my name is. I think you will get a different perspective from me as far as the agencies are concerned. Before I got out here, I had taught in Detroit for 10 years. Prior to that, I lived in a small town, and my son had gone to New York, and he came back, and the place where I was staying didn't allow, you know, I couldn't have anyone else on my lease. So I quickly, I called the Ann Arbor Shelter Association to see if they might be able to put him up for, until we found a place. And that's just how it happened. They took him in immediately, he got a place, he started taking classes at Washtenaw, and actually went to class, because he had to get up at 6 a.m. in the morning. So there was like structure to his life, and I just had all praises for that. And since then, I would go donate things like, I love apples, apple season, I would donate like bushels of apples, and just go back there and just really sort of let them know how appreciative I was. Well, that was probably about 2002. We had just moved back from New York, and I eventually ended up getting a teaching job in Detroit. And I would say probably about 2010, I was being shifted around because there was a lot of policy concerns in Detroit, administrative concerns, and emergency manager takeovers, all the nightmare that we had to go through. They cut our pay, and I ended up losing a lot of my income. It was sort of a little slow progression. They cut us one year $10,000, the next year 20%, and then there was a lot of, I needed mediation then because there was a lot of conflict between some of the administrators and staff. I was one of the staff that had a lot of conflict with administration. I had done high school and I went to middle school, and a whole different game. So I ended up having some conflicts and took some days off because I struggled with major depression too. So I took a family medical leave, and all of that sort of hurt my pay. And by 2012, they decided to just lay off 500 teachers, pretty much without notice, and no chance of recall. And that's what hit me the hardest. So I had to go through my savings and try to get to my savings. The timing was off in terms of me getting in time enough to not get evicted. I did have savings, but accessing them was, the big problem. And I felt overwhelmed, by the whole process. So anyway, to make a long story short, I lost my home in 2012 after being laid off in September, and moved in with family. There was conflict there, and so eventually I ended up at the Line Center. Right away, well, I'm not going to say right away. The first couple months was okay because I was happy to have a place to sleep. It was, what was it? It was cold. Let's see, I left in March. I haven't had to recount this in a while. Let's see, I guess February was when I was there. It was cold, and I had to, I was happy to, just have a place to sleep inside. And the whole procedure is you go and they give you blankets and mats. It's warm in there, so the people were very welcoming that were in there because I had heard so much about shelters. I was afraid, but everybody there was very welcoming, and I stayed there until about March when I began to have conflicts. Now, I mentioned I have major depression. That also comes with anxiety, okay, and becoming easily frustrated. And that's probably one of the worst places to become easily frustrated. And as it turned out, there was a policy that they had a multi-purpose room, and they would use it during the day for the dining room, and they would move all the chairs and tables back, and that's where the sleeping area was. Well, I noticed there were guys in there who would do that, would move everything back. And me being a product of the 70s, I was like, where are the women? Where are the ladies helping out? And they were saying, well, we have our staff here. And so I was insistent that I get in there and help, you know. It seemed only fair, and it just, you know, from my viewpoint, there has to be, you know, some sort of representation of women there. So I went through the process, and I was allowed to help, you know, clear out chairs and tables, get the room set up. And there was little resentment from the guys, and then there was a lot of resentment from the ladies, because they were like, well, how did she get chosen? You know, we've been out here, you know, we've been here for however long, and we've never had that opportunity. I didn't know that there was a little perk with it, which meant if you moved away the tables and chairs, that you didn't have to stand outside in the cold until, you know, the center opened at 9 o'clock. So that caused a lot of problems. Okay, so that's one place where there should have been a little conflict resolution in place. But, you know, that went on, and then one thing led to the next. I was also finally put into a floor upstairs. And the first day that I was there, I was told I had to be up by 7 o'clock, which was no problem, of course, and go to the second floor where, you know, everyone sort of met, and sort of what? No, sort of the meeting room, or when you watch TV and play cards and all that kind of stuff.
Social lounge.
Social lounge, right. That's what it was, thank you. So I got up and made it down to that area, and I remember it was Palm Sunday, and I asked if anyone was watching TV, because I wanted to watch Joel Osteen. And one guy said, yeah. And I just thought he said it just to prevent me from watching it. So I asked if anyone else is watching TV. No one answered, but the person on the floor, that's where the supervisor came in. She said, you can't come down here bossing people around and da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, I wasn't bossing, I was trying to just, you know, determine if anyone was watching TV. And then she went off, and then I went off. And da-da-da-da-da, and I called her the B word. So that got me punished and back downstairs on the main floor. And I said, I'm not putting up with this, and I got my car, and I took off, and I think I was going to Canada. I think that's what I had in my mind. No one, like Susan said, you're not really coherent, you know, when you're in that sort of circumstance. So I said, I think I'm just gonna go start off. I'm just gonna maybe go to Canada someplace. And I got there, and it was about 11-ish, and I hadn't counted on getting sleepy. So I started heading back, and I wasn't sure where I was going, but I saw a rest area, and I pulled there just to think, and I fell asleep, and I think I slept there for the next 6 months. Yeah, and then surprisingly, there were a lot of people in my circumstances in late model cars and had lost their home. So I hadn't had any experience with homelessness at that point. I was still allowed back to eat in the kitchen and interact with people, and through interaction with other people who were experiencing homelessness, I found something like the fact that I didn't have to run my car every night to stay warm. I was told, just get a bunch of blankets, you know, and hunker down, lay them across the back seat and hunker down, and you'll be okay. And I tried it, and I was warm. I got sleeping bags, I got just nice thermal blankets, and that kept me warm. Which goes to say, a lot of the information that we get experiencing homelessness comes from one another, okay? No agency told me that. By this time, I was starting to feel a little sort of disenfranchised with the agencies that I had thought were sort of beyond reproach before. One, through the warming center experience that I had, and secondly, there were things like my medication. They assured me that they would help me get my a very simple medication that I take for depression, and an antidepressant that I take, and just really kind of keeps me from, getting angry, or it keeps my anxiety at bay. And despite their promises, I didn't have my medication for weeks. And this was after constantly checking back. And that, of course, increased some of the problems in my ability to sort of interact with people, to make decisions. And I remember the process. They finally got the medication there, and it got lost. And no one was accountable for it. No one knew what happened. So I had to jump through a lot of hoops and go to the director and write letters. And they never got it resolved. Actually, a nurse came in to the Breakfast Church where we eat regularly, and she was the one who just randomly asked, does anyone need any help with their medications? And she was kind of doing this on her own. And I told her my story, and she was able to get my medications. So I lost a lot of faith in the agency through that experience, this happened at the Alliance Center, through the Washington House Alliance. There was sense that my experience, there was a policy put in place where someone has to sign, because I didn't even sign for the medication, but they said that I had it. And I hadn't taken the medication, I hadn't gotten it. So that was something that was put in place after that. Let's see, I left, but then I went back the following winter because I wasn't able to, get into a place, live in my car, trying to do everything from there. So the next year I went back, and I think the staff at the warming center where I stayed initially had sort of, the staffing had changed, and not for the better. The staff at that point consisted of people who were poorly trained. They didn't have degrees. They were people, they weren't even like grad students or first year students. These were people with possibly a high school education, and really didn't have the training to deal with the severity of the population that was coming in. And yes, it consisted of people like people just getting released from prison, people with drug addictions, alcohol addictions, people just stressed like I was. There's a combination of people there. And the frontline staff lacked the ability to really effectively deal with this population, which resulted in a lot of complaints, a lot of written complaints to the administrators, the directors, and for the most part, they all pretty much went unanswered. There were times when I had conflicts. I know there was a young man who just got really hostile towards me, because I was pretty much outspoken during the time that I was there. And he threatened to hit me with his fist. There wasn't anyone there except for the people who knew me, the people who were around, who sort of intervened. But there was no structure in place to prevent that. One thing, when I was teaching, I was told to always have your rules and expectations up, so that people sort of know what their expectations are and what they should expect from you. There was nothing posted to show, what the regulations were, what the expectations were. So it sort of resulted in there being a lot of leniency towards some people, sort of cliquish sort of environment, a very unhealthy environment for people who are experience the type of stresses that they are at that time. So in my mind, this is a place that clearly needs mediation, mediators there, who are able to help quickly resolve issues that might arise. Despite the fact that people come from all types of backgrounds, we all recognize that we're in a place where we could easily be put outside. So that sort of minimizes the sort of hostilities that you might otherwise get. People are pretty much willing to follow whatever the rules are once the rules are there. But I think that the rules, there weren't clear rules there. So, and this probably could be across the board. I just experienced the warming center. Let me see. I thought it was going to be a question and answer, so I'm sort of having to organize this as I go.
You didn't talk about getting trespassed.
Yeah, as a result of all this, like I said, I felt myself an advocate for people who were there. And one of the problems that I had was that the warming center is different from the actual, what's the place of residence, right. The warming center has clients where people sleep on the floor, in the base, downstairs in the multi-purpose room, and then upstairs you have the actual residence. So what happens is that our privileges are different. So if you sleep in the warming center, you can only shower between, say, the hours of 6 o'clock at night to 1 in the morning, okay? And after dragging around everything all day, I wasn't feeling like getting up in the shower if it was my time at 1 o'clock in the morning. Despite what people say, no one, you got a few people who were brave and, wanted to, I wasn't feeling it, I'm sorry. 6 o'clock to 1 o'clock in the morning is a very hard time. But I'm a morning person. So I fought for 24-hour access to the showers. And during that, I wanted to have sort of proof. And I remember sitting in the warming center one night and there were all these dirty socks, because you couldn't do laundry either. Filthy socks. So I started taking pictures. And someone really got upset and thought that their privacy was going to be compromised. So they called in, the staff that was there at that time. And I had taken pictures before, so at that point I was trespassed. Trespass means that you can't use, well, my trespassing lease was indefinite, and I'm not able to eat there, I'm not able to shower there, do laundry, because they provide quite a bit. No medical, and no storage. So I was pretty much detached from all the services that I needed at that point.
So trespass sort of means being kicked out.
Yeah, that's an easy way to put it, right?
But you can go in and sleep.
Oh, no, absolutely not. I can't sleep there, I can't use any of the facilities. And I'm not the only one who's been trespassed, and I believe that their trespassing policy kind of lacks insight, and it sort of defeats the whole idea of what they're doing, which is to help people sort of, find a place to sort of recover, if people are frequently being put back out on the streets, that sort of, hinders, their progress. So, yeah, I was trespassed, which means that for 2 years I couldn't get into the Groundcover Center, which meant that I had no place to go. For part of that time I had a car, but then without the proper upkeep, my car ended up getting, in mechanical disrepair, and I ended up losing it. So I was literally on the streets with nothing but me and my bags and stuff, and just trying to find little places where I could stay, couch surfing sometimes, but, you know, not very often. So it was difficult. And there was one agency that tried to intervene, and their insight, again, was so lacking that they weren't able to help me get back in. So I think
So when you were living on the street, did you have communication with other homeless people? Or?
Not real communication. I saw people, the way it goes is that people will go to wherever they can find to sleep, and then we pretty much all gather in certain places like the library or the bus stations or places that are open. And we'll discuss we won't discuss details, you know, where we were able to sleep or anything, but yeah, I mean, you do kind of communicate with each other, but nothing really is gonna really solve any problems.
How did you get involved in Groundcover?
I'm sorry, I know I'm rambling all over the place. I'm trying to have this focus, but shortly after I got out here, one of the places we had to go to eat breakfast was, anybody familiar with St. Andrews?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I sort of grasped on everything I thought they had. And one was a program called Right After Breakfast, WRITE. And I went there and I sat in a workshop, and I was able to write something about my experience eating breakfast. And it was called Bowl of Oatmeal. And I wrote an article in that, and I submitted it to Groundcover, and it was accepted. And after that, I sort of got signed up to be a vendor. And I started selling it and writing for it. And eventually, where I am now, it ended up paying for a hotel for me for 6 months on the street. And hotels it's very expensive living on the streets. Either you have something to pay for your costs, or you're just, you know, you're outside. So the Groundcover pretty much saved me from any more trauma than anything, you know, that I think I might have otherwise had. So that's how I got it, just through my own writing. And I didn't always sell Groundcover because there is a lot of rejection when you sell it, because the general public doesn't really get our, you know, who we are and why we're selling it. So I gave it up probably for about almost a year. And then, yeah, it was almost a year, and then I came back when we had what we just had, which is International Street Paper Vendor Week, which is celebrated all over the world, because there's a different name, but the concept's everywhere. In Chicago, we're streetwise, Street Sense in DC, Spare Change, or Real Change in Seattle. In London, it's called The Big Issue. So we had a celebration of all the street papers the first week of February. And that's usually a big event. And when they had it one year, Susan sent emails out. And I thought, I want to be a part of this, because Morgan Jordan, the basketball player, Jordan Morgan, I'm sorry, dyslexia going on, I'm sorry. But anyway, Jordan Morgan, who was a basketball player, was one who volunteered. And I said, this is perfect. And around that time, I started to say, you know, you've got to sift through the rejection and just get to people who really want to give. I decided I would do that. So I thought, between that with Jordan Morgan, okay, gotcha. Jordan makes sense for the first. Sounds like two first names, but anyway, Jordan Morgan. I thought I would sell out at the Y with him, and as it turned out, it was a really bad winter. You could only stand outside for like 5 or 10 minutes. And he was at Cherry Republic, and I was at the Y. He told me to go over there and meet with him, but it was virtually impossible because the weather was so bad. But through that process, I sort of got reacclimated with the paper and decided that I would try to sell it. And I started making probably about 25, 30 a day, just through sheer persistence and learning some strategies. And let's see, somewhere I realized that I could probably increase that. And one of the vendors, who's a vendor now, at that point he was just a street vendor, but he was a very good salesperson. And he later became our sales manager. He's our sales manager now. He had worked for a company prior to getting out here through some problems he had. And so he was willing to train us. And he taught me how to sell our $10 papers. And once I learned how to sell 4 of those a day, and I only had to make 50 a day, 55 from our hotel room, that was it. That was it. I was a little nervous because the $10 papers take a little more, you know, pushing, and you gotta really be sort of assertive. He gave me some skills. He said, what you do is you just get out and stand out there in the middle of people and say, hey, this is a $10 paper. You know, can I bother you for a minute? And I'm like, no way, I'm not going to do that, you know. And then I realized I've got to have a place to sleep tonight. So I went and I said, hey, have you seen our $10 paper? And it caught on. I sold my first one, my second one, my third one. And between that and the regular papers, I was able to make enough to as I said, keep the hotel room $5 a night for 6 months. Yes.
Regular paper is $1.
You're right. The regular paper is
And
still
how
$1.
And how much of that dollar goes to you?
Well, we buy the papers for 25 cents,
I see.
and whatever we make off of it, you know, is we get. And some place where I sell, some people tip from time to time. You know, we generally average about $1.50 to $2 a paper. You know, because
So what's the, I've never heard about the $10 paper.
the $10 paper comes out twice a year, and it generally has a certain theme. One theme was the biography of all the vendors. This theme is where we went to the conference in Seattle. Some of our vendors went and met with all the street papers all around the world. So it sort of recaps all the street papers around the world. And so that's our special issue for this year. We try to put out 2 a year.
Is it, it stays on sale until the second one comes out?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, Joe and I have gone through just about all of them. And Susan was telling us they weren't intended to be sold like that. And I'm like, I'm sorry, you know. But I'm saying, you know, I'm a salesperson extraordinaire. You know, I've got big dreams, you know. I'm going from teaching to my own, like public speaking now. You know, I'm out and I've never done this before, so hopefully I can do this. Hopefully I won't stutter as much. I'm like, you know, very great. Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
So are you sold out totally on the $10?
We're close to being sold out, but I do have a few. We have about 300. We started with what?
2,000.
2,000.
Okay.
Joe sells like 20 a day.
Well, who's Joe?
He's our sales manager.
Okay.
And whatever company he works for, he calls it that formula. He calls it, what is it, you know? IBD, something company, he calls it that formula. And he's so well versed in sales. He's the world's greatest sales. He has that book, that's sort of his Bible, you know, and he's done workshops and everything, so.
He's now in that situation of
Liz
meeting
Liz is one of the
hotel every
best
night.
salespersons I've ever seen.
Thank you. I appreciate that because I never really did sales, you know, until I took that moment and I stepped out and I said that, you know, hey, would you like a paper? And I've just been able to do that ever since.
I think Huda's question is really important because I've seen you all selling the paper, but I've never known how much you get from it. I always thought, you know, because there's a lot of, you know, the kids who come to your door selling candy bars and you don't know if they get a dime out of that, you know. And so it's really, it's good to educate people.
How much do you sell how much do you buy for $10?
We buy those for 2.
Huh?
And so generally it takes a little longer to sell those is the idea. But, you know, if you could sell like 4 or 5 a day, that makes, you know, a world of difference. You know, for me, I'm actually no longer in a hotel room, I'm paying for a room. So I'm sort of in that transition back to actual housing. And I found so much about myself that I didn't know. So the experience has been one I wouldn't trade for the world. I really wouldn't. I hope homelessness is really going to end. I hope by the end of the decade, it's going to go away. But for me to say I live that, not too many Americans really go for middle class and understand. There's so many myths and misconceptions about it. Well, I was out there and I was standing in line for the dinner one day, and I said, it was almost like being in heaven. I said, this is homelessness, you know, because you hear so much about it, and it's like, it's just so many, like I said, misperceptions. My editor here is going to say something. Misconceptions.
I was going to say that. Lit and Susan and I were
There's so
talking
many
about
questions.
what we were going to do here, and all of a sudden Lit looks under the washing, and she says, "Oh, it's time for me to get out, and I have to sell before dinner."
Oh, yeah.
How many do you have to sell before dinner?
I probably had like another $20 to make that night. I had a few papers to sell, so I have a schedule that I have to, we all have schedules that we have to keep, and it's just, you're working, this is my first job that I was able to actually work for myself. I've incorporated, I lit Unlimited, LLC. I bought these shoes myself with my money, with my own company. So I'm very proud of these, and I bought this coat this year. I'm always telling people I got my own business and I'm buying stuff from my business. So
And that schedule she referred to is her schedule, it's not something that we.
No, I'm totally self-employed. You know, I'm an independent contractor, and I think I gotta pay taxes this year.
Oh,
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, you know, well, I do know her,
Yeah.
but she's right, because I actually, and I have no problem admitting it, because I suffer from depression. And I know what that can do, and it can make you look at things differently than other people would, but it also allows you sometimes to see things other people do not see.
Right.
And I was just gonna say, and you are right about the agencies, because I've had to go through some of the agencies as well, like she's saying, and sometimes they discriminate, or what they do is they put everybody that comes down there in a certain class, and they don't stop to look at, everybody doesn't have the same situation. There are people that's trying to take the system and take it for a ride, but there are people that, just like you, was out there working just like you, and they fell down, you know, on their luck or whatever. And so she's right, you know, when she says that, and I just wanted to back her up. And they don't look at things right because they're not in that situation. So if you get in it, then you'll see it different, you know. So I just wanted to back her up and say that.
Right. And that, you know, in terms of mediation, that trespass situation is one that would be excellent for mediation, because there are many, many people that, you know, when they trespass you, they generally, it's like a blanket year, but you can appeal it. But people have so much distrust already that they figure it's not worth it. But if they had an ally with them, it might be different.
Right.
But Susan, why is it called trespass? This is
Because
upsetting me.
because
It's a legal thing.
they call the police,
Yeah.
and the
Right.
police issue a trespass order. So if you
Oh,
come
I know
back
what
on
they
that,
know.
to that
You're
location,
trespassing.
you're trespassing and can be taken to jail.
But in a way, it is also as if they are not letting people know, or it's not obvious, that you are barred. You're disbarred from coming into the
No, they
usual.
tell them,
Yeah.
they know.
I know, but we as
Oh,
people
yeah,
in
no,
the
no,
community,
yeah, yeah.
if someone's
That's-
trespassed,
Right.
trespass, it doesn't mean anything. But
Absolutely.
when you tell me someone is thrown out from the last haven they
Yes.
had,
Yes.
from the elements, from anything, this is horrible. I mean, there's, you know,
Yeah.
it's like hidden things.
It's so, yeah.
Can I,
Absolutely.
so one, I want to say thank you for sharing your story with us today. It was very insightful. I think, as Carlita said, there's this image of what we have about those who may be homeless, and I think you put an important face on that community. And your story seems to differ from any other story that I've read. Tent City and those kind of stories that hit the paper, they never talk about those folks who live life every day, as you said, a middle-class lifestyle, and job loss, home loss, and just sort of snowballs from there. The other thing I wanted to say, and I've said this before, there's a lot of work to do in the community, and the work that we do at the Dispute Resolution Center fits so many different places in our society. And I'm thinking of the restorative process, peacemaking. I think, Susan, didn't you interview? Yeah, I remember that, yeah, on the peacemaking stuff. So we have been in the Groundcover, I'm proud to say. I'm sure I still have that edition, about the work of the DRC. I've heard similar concerns about that system before. I've been over to the Delana Center, and I don't want to pass judgment on them. I don't know why they have so many damn rules. I'm just not a person that can thrive with so many rules, because humanity, for me, supersedes the rules. And they do have a very rigid process, and maybe that's warranted. I mean, I don't know. But I do agree that there may be a place for the kind of work that we do because of humanity. It's sometimes as agencies, we can overrule ourselves, that we kind of move away from our purpose, our mission, because we have so many rules and so many boundaries, and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So it's kind of saddening to hear that these rules created a 2-year trespass, and a person had no place to be. So I share, like food, I'm sitting over here, my ears are actually burning right now, my ears are warm. That's where I hold a lot of my frustration. My ears are getting hot.
I haven't even told you some of the words. I mean, that was one, but do you mind?
Well, I'll wrap up quickly. So I guess I'm just wondering, the two of you have much more insight than we do. I know Ellen, I've met her, we certainly have been in the same room together a number of times. How do we lend our support there? How do we, beyond the general presentation, and sometimes, directors speak to directors, and it's sort of just, it's in one ear, out the other, because you have all this stuff to take care of to keep your organization going. Who would be the best person to set up something where mediators can be called in when you have a person, not such a rule that is causing harm, or an egregious that's causing harm, or a threat, you're not burning up the place, but a real, true misunderstanding between what a frontline staff, and if those of us who work, I've been a frontline staff, I screwed up a lot because I didn't understand. So I have the authority to interpret the rule and to make a decision that greatly affects someone else's life. Who is the best person beyond Ellen? Is there another person that we could be in touch with to see if this is something that they'd be willing to do? Call us in when you need us, before the 3 strike, whatever that system might be, because obviously if this county is committed to eradicating homelessness, this is not going to support that initiative in my mind.
Right, so I would say still to start with Ellen, but like if you told Ellen what about this 2-year trespass, she'd say we don't trespass people for 2 years. We do it for a year, and they can always appeal it. There's a process. We can, if they acknowledge that what they did wrong and they're not going to do it again, we can reduce that. So. But the onus is always on the person who's been trespassed, and so.
Right.
Who's homeless, right?
Right. So what I'd suggest would be talking to Ellen about having the trespass process include when they're being trespassed, at that time for them to say, I think this is unfair, and I would like it mediated. I would like mediation, and to have that just be the norm. And then, because when they do that, when they do the trespass reviews, they bring in all those frontline staff. Everybody who is involved is supposed to be involved. So then they get trained through the mediation process as well.
Hands are flying up.
Is there any sort of ombudsman or anyone to appeal to in the system, or for the person who's been trespassed?
Yes, yeah, they can file an appeal with the Delana Center. I think you just go to the front desk and say I want to appeal it, and then it works its way up the chain.
Two questions. One is, I assume you're still on the medication?
Oh, absolutely, I
And
was
so-
very proactive, I've learned to be very proactive.
Yeah, so how does that get provided these days?
The medication?
For you?
For me, fortunately, I'm on a medication that is like a generic of the Celexa that I was prescribed. So Walmart has it for like $3 or $4.
So, but you purchase it?
But I purchased it.
You
I
did.
was able to get the Medicaid, under the Medicaid expansion that
Yeah.
Obama put in place. My coverage does cover my medication. Right now, it's sort of lapsed because I have to, and that's something, I guess it would be different from mediation. I need to get, I'll just find out what type of insurance I have, because I may be at an income. You know, if I'm making $1,500 a month, or, you know, I'm doing other things too, that I may have to pay my own insurance. And I need to get through that process. But I want to talk about the mediation process, or the appeals process at the Wellness Center. It sounds simple on the surface. It really does sound simple. You go to the front desk, you let them know that you want to appeal your suspension, and ostensibly it sounds easy. Okay, you said it this morning, but in reality, it's a very different story. When I went to appeal my suspension, I didn't have a car at that time. And I knew if they didn't take me in, that I'd be on the streets that night. So there wasn't really a lot of time to commit to filling out the paperwork that I needed. So I just sort of put something down, I apologize, or I didn't have a chance to think it through, and hoped that they would let me in. Now, this is not the residency, this is the warming center, where, you know, you just go pull up a mat, you know. But I think they knew me from before for whatever reason, and they said, we'll make a decision on Friday. Well, here this is Tuesday, and I don't have any place to sleep that night. So you get extremely frustrated with the process. The whole idea that anyone would risk you having to sleep outside while they're making a decision is just, you know, unbelievable.
And that's
So-
routine, they only do them on Friday.
They only do them on Fridays.
I guess every Friday that they have some.
Right, and here it's the middle of the winter, and I have no place to sleep that night. So, and I am also indignant, I guess, maybe, about the fact that right now, they have a policy where if someone needs a home or needs a shelter in the middle of the night, it's not provided. You have to go the next day and get accepted into whatever, do the intake the following day. So had that policy been in effect when I first got out here, I wouldn't have had a place to stay. They told me to come back at 9 o'clock, and that was it.
There's no emergency shelter, is
There's
what
no
you're saying.
emergency shelter. And that bothers me too, because I think Susan addressed earlier about some incentives that people get, the agencies get. They're getting, what is that agency where they list all of the nonprofits and they get like stars?
Oh, and the charity navigator.
Something like that. They're getting high marks for being an emergency shelter, and they're not. And they clearly say they're not an
The
emergency
day
shelter.
after emergency.
Now it is. Now it is. If you make it through that next day. I mean, homelessness is no joke. You know, I grew up listening to homeless stories, and I thought, well, I guess they're okay. It is not. It's brutal. It's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
You know, you're facing the elements, one person against the elements, and you just try to bring all of your survival instincts into play and try to get through
And
it.
this has played out with some of our abuse and neglect cases where the families were homeless or are homeless and ran into all of these brick walls or what became barriers. And in those cases, the barriers were even surmounted because they became barriers to reunification with their children. So you have that stressor too. Your children have been taken away, they're somewhere, you don't quite know where immediately, and you're homeless. So I'm just saying that the picture is uglier
Yeah,
than we might even want to imagine.
exactly.
Well,
So Sarah, you've had your hand up.
I'm sorry, and I keep.
Oh, I was just, Have you ever connected with the group in town, the Mission Group, which is, it's a very, I have a little bit of contact with them, and it seems like a pretty cohesive community of people who are living in homelessness or formerly homeless, and they're a community, they are organized. Had you connected with them?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I've connected with just about every agency out here, and Mission is one. As a matter of fact, after having lived with shelter or the warming center for a few weeks, they have 2 mercy houses.
Yeah.
At that point, they only have 1,
Yeah.
and that's a place where they generally open up their home. Well, they do open up a home where you can go in, you can shower, you can do laundry, you can make snacks. It's just a wonderful place to go if you have lived in sort of a communal environment where everything is sort of, you know, like hospitalized, that's what I'm trying to say.
Institutionalized?
Institutionalized, right. You know, and to go to an actual home. So they provide that. They deal with some of the issues that go with the Life Center because I hear at one point you weren't able to sleep on a mat, you had to sit in a chair.
Yeah.
So there's been some progress made through agencies like that. I tried to start an agency, my former person who was homeless and myself, we started something called our 2020 Vision, where we sought to end homelessness by the end of the decade. And we fought for breakfast because many people are elderly or disabled and are unable to walk to the breakfast church. We also fought for 24-hour showers, and we also fought for
This is within the Nuance.
within the Nuance Center and within the client, within the warming center, 24-hour access to showers and computer access, so Wi-Fi. Since we left, all that's there now. They never said that, you know, but we did fight for that.
Right.
So, Mission has its own agenda. Some of it I agree with, some of it is different. I think there can't be too many hands on board for this. I think all hands need to be on deck for this. And if I could just sort of switch to what Belinda okay, said earlier about how you can get engaged with this, with homelessness and resolving some of the problems. I hope this leaves you, or this group, with an understanding that we do need, that it is a huge problem, and that we do need all hands on deck. And that maybe you can put together policies that would begin to address, and it's just gonna happen. Sorry.
So while Lynn is getting her throat together, I just want to say another area where you guys could make a huge difference is intercepting some of the cases that come to, some of the court cases that involve people who are homeless, especially some of the nuisance cases, you know, like drunk and disorderly or vagrancy. Yeah, we're not too bad with the vagrancy ones here, but again, when people get picked up for silly stuff, it triggers all that built-up anger and resentment and frustration and hopelessness, and it explodes, and it ends up sometimes in much bigger consequences. So, one of our other Groundcover members ended up spending an extra 3 months in jail because she ticked off the judge. She was unrepresented. She kept thinking it was her turn to talk, and he was pausing, and he said, contempt of court,
So,
3
and
months.
you don't have to answer this question now, but the questions in my head are are we talking about a specific court, a specific judge, or?
Well, that
on the
was
side,
one, that was
yeah.
a specific court here in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, I know, but is it the same judge that hears these cases, or it just depends on where
It depends on
where they're being picked up?
Yeah, now usually, if you're talking about J court, the.
J court,
Well, there's a special court as well. They're really adept at handling, they're really good at this. But when somebody gets called into like district court,
Okay.
those judges they have no
I just want to know what's the story with your son now? What's he doing? Is he still in school? I'm just interested. Did he finish? Did you go back to New York? You left us hanging.
I'm sorry, I didn't realize that. Little cliffhanger there. Actually, my son was, and his wife were the ones who I went to when I first lost my home. There was some sort of problem between, my daughter-in-law and me. See, he's an adult and married divorced by his wife, so
He's
Was
okay.
he doing okay?
oh, he's doing well. Last I heard, we're sort of strange right now because of this. And that happens a lot in the homeless community. I think a lot of people who are out here are because of they're estranged from their family. Most people out here don't have the support of their families. That's just across the board. And I think from the judges to people on the street to police officers, people have to understand that when people are homeless, we're in crisis. And our interactions with people, whether it be blurting out in court or, saying something inappropriate to a police officer or making a comment on the street, we're in crisis. I mean, not too many people know what it's like to have nothing and to feel that desperation. And I think we need to recognize as agencies that this is a crisis, that people are in crisis. And I always say we're all homeless. We're all homeless. The reason I say that, if you can't go to a place, if something were to happen at 3 o'clock in the morning, then you're homeless. We're all in this boat together. It's just some of us are housed and some of us aren't. But as far as the structure of the government, in terms of addressing the needs of people, no one seems to, once you are deemed homeless, you lose so many rights, and it can happen to anyone. And, I know Richard Gere just did a movie, and he was just so surprised how no one recognized him. And I've seen other people say that, it's the only place you can sort of become invisible, and no one cares. Even your family, because there's such stigmatization associated with it. I've always used the word homeless, even though I know there's a stigma associated with it, because I want people to understand that, it is real. It's okay to say the word. I think we need to have a more politically correct term for it, that, housing insecure or whatever. But right now, it is what it is. And I think it's shocking for some people to see that there are other sides of homelessness than what the media has presented. That's where Groundcover really does come in, the street paper.
So this lady's been waiting.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I know, that's okay. I have 2 points that I would like to comment on. One is that just addressing Belinda's point about rules and addressing your point about the mission. And I'm not sure what your disagreement with the mission is. But at least I think the mission is incredibly hindered by city rules. The people who can use the showers, who can use the kitchen, who can use the computer, cannot put up a tent on the mission grounds to spend the night. I think that's a severe rule limitation, and if nothing else, that would take care of you at that 3 o'clock in the morning. And go ahead.
And I agree with that. The only thing, the problem I have with, I don't know if it's really a disagreement, but I don't want to spend too much energy in staying homeless. I want to see more initiatives towards putting people in sanitary conditions where you have access to, a place to sleep, a place to store your belongings, and clean sanitary bathing conditions.
So do you know about the small house project?
I am very familiar with that, and that is a wonderful project that Mission has going. And I'm sad that the government isn't behind that.
The rules, exactly.
Yeah.
Nobody wants the small house project in their neighborhood.
Right.
You look at the neighborhood and you say it's ideal, and the neighbors say no.
Yeah.
So as I said, we have to educate our society. We have to change that.
Well, that might be an opportunity for mediation with all the stakeholders to work with the neighbors and the people interested in the project to have conversations to understand.
Some
This
facilitators.
lady, she's also been waiting a really long time.
Thank you, and I have to actually go, so thank you. I apologize for having to leave a few minutes early, but I just wanted to make a couple of quick comments, sort of responding to what you've said and others have said about mediation and how it could help, but how difficult it sounds like it is to access. So, especially intervening at the lowest possible level of conflict before it gets to the courts, ideally. So for the example of the trespass situation that you described in detail, I'm just sort of problem solving in my head and wondering, is there a way for mediation, the option to mediate, to be built into that process so that, it's in the notice that you get? And who do you work with to make that a reality? Or is there a way for people to know that it's available to them? A bulletin board in these centers where it simply says, are you having conflict? The Dispute Resolution Center is available to you, call us.
Yeah, I believe that is possible. As speaks to what Melinda said earlier, is that, like you said, who do you go to? On what level did you start the mediation? I think it needs to be, well, I want to say, I've gone to Ellen before, and she hasn't necessarily welcomed all of the suggestions. So maybe an agency going in with suggestions and you explain your expertise. I think because there was a group where we could meet weekly, and it was a conflict resolution group, but you met by choice. I think it should be part of the intake process, or somewhere along the line, sort of mandatory, that you go through the rules and know that before a conflict arises, that you do have this, mediation through whoever it is that wants to provide it. Because Delana says they are pretty much a shell. They don't provide any of these services, but any group can come in. And, that was my experience there, can come in and present or whatever. But I would like to see it as part of their actual intake process or whatever it is.
Yeah. And then also maybe, have you ever thought of putting in the Groundcover just a standing little free ad for the DRC, or I don't know if that's possible, but just so that people know it's there, because I think that's one of the challenges.
The DRC is...
The mediation.
Yeah.
Just so people know it's
the ads
out there.
are $49.95.
And she brought some ground covers to sell.
Second day of March.
If anybody wants to get that $10 paper, here's your chance.
Oh, yeah, I got the whole bit. I got the biannual one and the monthly one.
But joking aside, is that a possibility to put an ad in the paper that because we don't have any money to be putting ads in the paper, so is there a way to do, if it's going to benefit the community, is there a way to do that?
Since I'm thinking, since it's all volunteers coming to mediate, the ad should be also free.
Possibly, but my biggest hesitation is that a little ad saying we're here isn't going to do anything. You need people to understand. I did.
And I'm a writer, I wouldn't mind doing it.
But we could do another one.
There may be an article talking about this that Lick can write would be helpful. But let me also just say from a reality check perspective, it's not as easy as me talking to Ellen and saying, guess what, remember us, we're here. I've talked to Ellen before, she knows about the DRC. Let us address these things. These become policies and practices of the Delana Center, and we're asking them to change and relax it or make allowances for some negotiated agreement that might be in favor of the resident. And then what do you do about all the others? who are clearly breaking. So these become bigger conversations that can be had, but I don't want anyone to think that we're just gonna go over there and make it happen in the next month or so, because it's not gonna, that's just not realistic. And usually when institutions are considering how to use us, even with the courts, they have to think about how much authority are they willing to give up in order to let this thrive within the system. Because what we know about mediation, we balance the power. So it's not about the rules of the organization anymore, it's about the empowerment that we give to the person who has perceivably broken that rule. So we have to think about that in this totality. But what you've just said, there may be some opportunities, being a part of the Groundcover, maybe an article or something, maybe this conflict resolution group that you've talked about, maybe that's an entry point, I don't know. So maybe we can talk offline further. Sally, would you be willing to?
If Ellen isn't receptive, what about the board?
Well, that might, and I would imagine she would have to consult with her board to have such a change to occur. So I don't know, maybe we can look into who's on the board and see how we can pitch a proposal. Because some of our Avalon housing clients have come through the lawn center, and they are in their transitional process.
My second point was that,
So there's people behind you who are trying to
Oh, I'm sorry.
participate too.
sorry, so my second point was actually that while DRC wants to balance power, and definitely in individual cases, however, it's extremely hard to do. So we had a homeless person and the owner of an establishment in town who had refused that person to sit there and drink coffee, you know, and I was like, really? And we could never get anywhere with that case because the owner of the establishment had power, and the owner of the establishment was only going to say, okay, we won't kick you out if you won't come in. Now, what kind of a settlement is that? And so I find that there are limits to mediation again, unless there is a whole sea of change.
Well, you know, I've dealt with Ellen before, okay, and I've dealt with the Board of Commissioners. We've addressed all of these concerns with both parties, and the Board of Commissioners agreed in their meeting to sit down with us and to have this been an ongoing conversation as to how we can resolve some of these issues, and then they literally backed down. So I think we need the public's input, we need agencies' input to keep it urgent, you know, to keep it visible. I think that's what happens. These tend to go back down under the radar and they're not addressed. Like the Black Lives Matter movement, you know, there's a lot of chatter about it and people are keeping it up and they're keeping it going. This matters too. You know, these are humanitarian issues. And I think that we need many people behind it, many people who are able to speak up and to attend meetings such as we go to the commissioners, to write letters to Ellen or whatever it takes, because, you know, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen unless, you know, we put something behind it, a little energy behind it.
Yes. I was encouraged by your brief comment that homelessness is not going to be around very much longer. What do you see that I don't see?
Well, first of all, they should never make me homeless, because I'm not going to stop until it ends. I see a lot of policy changes that need to go into effect. And I'm also encouraged by the fact that we live in a different century. People who experienced homelessness last century are much different from people who are experiencing homelessness now. I'm waiting for them to say there's an act for that. because, you know, it's sometimes it's just a matter of putting the right minds behind something, and nobody's sitting down doing anything. The Y, some of our major agencies, the libraries, a lot of the institutions that I think are the churches, just don't really have the impetus or
big
the
community
energy.
centers?
Right. We just need the support, and we just need somebody we need all hands on deck, because it's a behemoth, and we can't do it without everybody taking, no one is exempt from helping homeless, because it's a social crisis, you know, and everyone needs to be on board with it. As I said, we're all homeless. If you're only a paycheck away, or if you're only an incident away from falling down and being on the streets, then you're homeless. And we have to look at it from that perspective, and then we'll have more empathy towards one another. Be thankful that we're on this side, you know, of homelessness, and not on that side, and use our energies to pull our brothers and sisters out of it. Wow. That sounds